Good evening. We'll now return to open session. We only have, in regards to item 4B, the grad waiver is part of the consent agenda. Before we approve the agenda, can I ask if someone would volunteer to read the board norms this evening? Thank you, Dan. I'll let you go.
Board will come prepared and be fully present and engaged, deliberate effectively and listen openly without interrupting, work collaboratively and strive for consensus, maintain perspective with a sense of humor, not repeat each other or ourselves, not have side conversations, give full attention to the proceedings, no cell phone use, focus on the best interests of all students, commit to no surprises.
Thank you, Dan. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That passed. Do we have any public comments on the consent agenda? Are there any trustees that'd like to remove any items on the consent agenda to discuss separately or consider separately? Okay, no. Can I ask for a motion then to approve the consent agenda? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, that passed. Now we'll move on to trustee considerations. And we have several here. So the first item is Corbett Elson to discuss final STRS and PERS pension rates enacted in 2019-20 state budget and impact on the district's adopted budget. Thank you. Thank you.
I've got a short and brief update. Last time we were here, the board adopted a budget for the 2019-20 school year, and since then, the state legislature has enacted the state budget. In that had some changes from the previous May revise of the governor's proposal outlined here. Mary, if you would, could you pull up the attachment, please? Thank you. So as you may recall, back in January, there was a talk about some pension relief. We, in our local budget, chose to adopt the governor's May revision, which includes some relief both for PERS and STRS. I'm sorry, just for STRS. So the green, the left column, if you will, reflects the governor's May revised proposal in May, and that is what the TAM district budgeted. Those rates, the employer rates for STRS at 16.7% and 20.73%. Those are statewide percentages, and that's something that we choose. And the dollar amount is local for the TAM district associated with that. In blue, on June 13th, is what the enacted state budget is, and there's some adjustments there. You'll see that the STRS employer contribution went up slightly by 0.4%, which represents an increase of roughly $146,000 for the TAM district. But the state legislature has enacted a budget that also includes some PERS rates, a reduction of 1.01 to be exact, which includes an expense reduction of roughly $130,000. So the net of that to the TAM district is roughly $15,000 more expenses across the two. This is not considered material, so we do not need to provide a formal budget revision. But in the state of transparency, given all the conversation around the state regarding pension reform, I just want to bring that forward and I'll bring this to your attention. Otherwise, that's all. Unless there's any questions, I'm open to any questions.
I have a question. Do you know why they changed it?
My understanding from colleagues around the county is, well, in the governor's May revision, there's solely STRS pension relief. And that was coming from non-Prop 98 funding. Prop 98 is solely education, so for it to come from the other side of the state budget, there was some concern with PERS. Why are we not having any PERS relief when that is the largest by far public employee system? So I think that was a give and take with the legislature. The PERS relief is solely for public schools. I should note that. One thing that is also in the state budget that's not reflected here, the state also invested quite a sum of money to pay down the liability. So that down the road, when that liability is invested in Wall Street and obviously has some positive returns, over the long term, that should reduce the rates, the employer rates over the long term. So it's a short-term immediate reflected here, and hopefully some longer term. Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. Well, thank you.
Great. Last comment, this will be formally reflected in the first interim budget in December.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Corbett. Next item, Tara Topier, the district's response to the Marin Civil Grand Jury report on vaping.
Sure. So tonight we have three civil grand jury reports. The first one on vaping around the under-the-radar epidemic. Mary, could you pull it up? Everyone had a chance to read it, but we have been working through our wellness program, particularly and through the TUHSD grants, to provide education to students. Particularly the Redwood High TUHSD program did a pretty good print flyer that was disseminated. And we have programs at all three sites. We've been fortunate to work with various resources around the county. So I responded to the grand jury that I feel we are doing a lot of what they're asking for, and we will continue to do so. We've also recently applied for an additional TUHSD grant, which would provide up to another $25,000 to continue to provide education, particularly around vaping. We did have some, for the first time, California Healthy Kids report on vaping. For us, the numbers of vaping at school were lower than we thought they would be, so we're hoping to see that through education, a continued downward trend of that.
Thank you. So do each of you have this letter in your packet? Okay. I'm just not sure if I'm the only one that have
No, they
it.
don't have the letter, but it was on the
It's on the
attached to the
attachment. We
agenda.
don't have
Okay, so you don't, okay. Just make sure, do you have any comments to the letter? Anything you want to strike that you could share, or just?
If there are any slight wording issues that have to come through now, or is this the only opportunity?
Should know.
If it's not substantive to the meaning, you can email it, but if it's substantive to the meaning, then we should discuss it.
Just email.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go ahead and sign it, but I'll wait to see if you have some minor.
May I ask a
editorial-
question about one of the things, I think you referenced vaping detectors that were put in the restrooms?
They're being put in this summer, yeah.
And this is selfishly coming from Alameda, too? Because
Yeah.
I sent
Yeah.
an email to our principal. But are they effective? I mean,
We don't know.
but I mean, is it something new on the market?
It's something that's new on the market. These came through Marin Central Police and a grant that they got. They do require internet access, so we've had to cable and wire and bore and all that stuff. So we'll find out. They're interesting because they also detect disruptive noise, is what they call it. So the idea is that they also might detect fights, physical altercations, or unnecessary loud yelling or screaming in the bathrooms. Yeah.
Great.
I was wondering, do they sound an alarm so that the kids know that they, like a smoke alarm, or does it sound a thing?
No, they send a
And then a
send
teacher
a
walks into
message.
the bathroom.
They send a message to administration saying there's they send an alert to identified address saying there's an alert here.
I did hear from a community member that I think has met with various school groups, but that, for instance, at Marin Catholic, they actually have dogs, and it's an organization that purposely, it's not German Shepherds like my dog, but it's fluffy little sweet dogs, and it's used as a deterrent. It's not meant to do anything other than be an extension of the assistant principal, and the person is not, it's not the way you think of with the airports. I found it, I went in very skeptical, but the more I heard about it, I thought, gee, I'd like to hear more. No, it's really a way to say, to allow the school to say, why don't you not have that here? So, yeah, but. Okay, so I think we can move on, unless there's any other comment, we can move on to the next item.
I do have a question, and I don't, it's for several of our grand jury letters, where we say we'll provide updates. And I guess I want to discuss what's our requirement for doing that, because some of us may think that grand jury requests come fast and furious to the schools and take a lot of time to put the response together. And are we creating obligations for ourselves on future status updates that perhaps we should leave to the grand jury to
That's a good
ask
question.
for?
I think in the past, I've had both experiences where we haven't put it in and they've come back and asked us for something. So some of them are preemptive and fairly short. I think for me, like, they've been installed.
Yeah, I think we've even sent one saying there's no update.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really but it's a good point.
Yeah, I just want to be conscious of the
Right.
district's time spent on this.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
That is a good point. I just heard Lars say thank you, because I know you do a lot of that work. Okay, so let's move on to the next grand jury report, school resource officers.
Yeah, again, so this one, we have school resource officers. We're getting a new one in TAM. I just met with the chief of police this week, so we're excited about that. Like us, the police are sometimes shorthanded and don't have, someone to assign, but we have had great partnerships with our law enforcement. We work very closely with Central Marin, with the Sheriff's Office, with Mill Valley. So, I value our school resource officers. We have them. You saw the idea that we should take on some of the expense is just beyond our purview right now.
Any comments, questions? Nope, thank you. And now we'll move on to the status of career technical education in Marin County.
Yep. So this was an interesting timing, as we just participated with the county-wide in a huge grant around career technical ed. So, a lot of that was we're doing a lot of this, and we're looking to expand, and we're just entering the first year of that grant, which is to do just this. So, I feel, I think that there's some more education that can be done, but we provide a lot of information to students. There were some things in here that I'm like, I don't know if that's really the way to go. I don't know that we should provide earning potential for just certain careers. We use Naviance, and kids have the ability to see those kinds of data points based on their own interest. I think we need to keep that in mind too, of what students are interested in. CTE is a great program, and has great programs, and we're building out particularly our computer programming and our engineering. We're also exploring the sustainable agriculture as a soil chemistry pathway. So I think we have some good things going, and that we're trying to be responsive to our students as well, and the interests that they have.
Yeah, and I think this is, in my opinion, one of the ones where the grand jury just kind of came out with a blanket statement to schools in Marin, because we saw some pushback in the IJ from the president of College of Marin saying, we have all these things in place, just as many of the high schools do too. And I do think Naviance provides a tremendous amount of information, so that we don't need to publish that salary information separately from that. And then also, there's a lot in the business journals these days about the skills that are actually really required for a career are critical thinking and adaptability. And certainly that's taught within our schools, right? I mean, I know the grand jury is looking at specific programs, so there's a linear connection to something pre-college, right? So post-high school, but pre-college. Sure. But a lot of the skills that we teach in our classrooms are really the ones that are going to allow students to adapt to whatever the jobs are, or whatever the requirements of a job when they get into it, whether it's with a college degree or without a college degree.
Right.
Any other comment? Okay, why don't we move on? Update to Board Policy and Administrative Regulations 5117, Interdistrict Transfer Attendance, Interdistrict Attendance.
Yeah, so this was a conversation that we had started earlier in the year. There have been some changes via CSBA to this policy, and then additional changes that came out. I think most specifically, the new policy doesn't require the timeline to be in the policy, but rather to be published on our website, which is a little more flexibility, and also allows us to reinstate a timeline that we had that had been removed the last time this had been updated, and kind of created a sort of messy, ongoing, sort of rolling process that doesn't help us or people trying to enter the district. We feel like having a definitive timeline and for narrowing the reasons why students can transfer into the district at this time of tight budget and increased enrollment was prudent for the district. So you've been provided the redlining as well as the clean copy.
Cynthia, would you like to make a comment?
See, they turned my microphone off. No, I agree with the removal of Section 8 regarding unique program. And I would like us to perhaps consider, only based on a overturn or granting of an appeal from a decision made in this district that the county made, right? That we look at number 2, when the student has a sibling attending school in the receiving district, to avoid splitting the family's attendance. Because that, particularly in times, it's one thing if we grant the IDT, but if we don't grant the IDT and the county overturns our decision, I don't think I don't know. It's something to be discussed.
Sure.
Because the board can grant an interdistrict transfer for whatever reason they would like to. So I don't know that we need to spell out
Sure.
that category, but I don't know.
Well, and I think it would also, do we then ask them if they have siblings that are younger? Because in effect, are you approving an interdistrict transfer for the family?
Right. I think that's a really good point. I didn't catch that. Any other clarifications or questions? I'm glad we're doing this now. Glad we're able to get this done. So the idea is at the next board meeting, we would be able to take action.
Yeah. So for clarification from board, do you want me to strike number 2 on AR 5117, interdistrict transfer attendance?
I do.
Yeah, I support that too.
Yeah, I think it makes good sense. How about you, Dan?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Making progress.
Sound surprised.
No. Okay, so now we're on to discuss and approve the application for Board of Trustee candidates for provisional appointment. So in your folder is the revised version, which still requires some revisions. I'll just make that note to you. I think what it was that we may add a date depending on our confirmation of the timeline. And I'm wondering if, I know that, and I do apologize, I sent an email and I had the date mixed up for the informational meeting. And so I think what we talked about, and it's on the attachment, announcement of a board vacancy and procedure for application. Does it make sense to you all that we first talk about this and then look at the application? So why don't we nail this down? Part of the idea here is that we would accomplish two things. One is that we would have the information meeting before the applicant submits their written application. We need to clarify, because it is vacation season, whether this is going to be a requirement or a highly recommended activity. We may want to consider, we would quickly put together a summary for the applicants, for anyone that maybe is not able to come. That's something for us to discuss with this, because I don't think we came to any conclusions about that last time. And then the other issue around the information meeting was that we had some discussion, or I had a discussion, and I wanted to bring it to the board, that having the superintendent attend that meeting as well, even though this is strictly a board action, the superintendent knows the district better than any of us on the board, and if there's a question that's specific to the district that applicant thinks is important to determine whether they want to apply or not, it would be helpful to have the superintendent attend and kind of be there to observe, although it clearly is completely our meeting and our decision. So I just thought I would open that up if anyone had any thoughts about that, or if you wanted to ask, I guess, Tara, if you have anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would like to be at the informational meeting. I think optically, it might look weird to not have the superintendent present. I am the single employee of the board, and that person will be working with me too, even though I'm not in the selection process. So for me personally, I would prefer to be there, just to be present and witness and provide any information that might come up around the district specifically. So the date I suggested was August 1st. That still gives them almost a week before the applications are due, and I'll be back in town.
Okay, just to clarify for our large audience, that we were not excluding the superintendent of the meeting. This was necessitated by the timing of the announcement, longstanding vacation plans. And so August 1st looks like it's a good compromise. That I didn't realize you were going to be back that soon, and does still give time. Because when we had looked at earlier dates, the information session was too close to the closing of the application time period, and often candidates use the information workshop, which I don't think can be required, but they use that to decide whether they want to go ahead and apply.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with August 1st.
Dan or Kevin, when you look at these dates, does this make sense, and it makes sense to?
I think the dates make sense, and I think Tara should be at that meeting.
So, agree with both of those. I won't be here on the 1st, but dates make sense, and great that you'll be here.
Okay.
So the other question on that is, will 3 board members be here?
I am not here on the 1st.
Okay.
Cynthia, what are you doing August 1st?
Well, clearly serving the district.
I'll see you here.
I asked because Mary and I were trying to figure out if we would have to notice it.
You'd have
Right.
to notice it.
But so if it's just 2 of you, then we won't have to notice that.
Yeah. But we will advertise it. It just won't be officially noticed as a board meeting. Okay, very good. So I think we've got that part nailed down. The other part that I thought deserved a little bit of time, in addition to finalizing the written application, was to talk about a little bit more about the oral interviews. And we talked at the end of the meeting about the forced ranking, and I thought we could just talk about that a little bit more. Another bit of feedback we received from our attorney is that during oral interviews in other parts of the state, he has seen the trustees request that only one member be in the room at any given time, one applicant. and so that it's not a situation where you're constantly moving the microphone in different directions and people are hearing other people's responses. Now, as he noted, we can't enforce that.
Yeah.
It's voluntary, but I did want to bring it up just to let the full board know. I didn't want to presume that you thought it was a bad idea. I just wanted to throw that out there. If you have 9, it clearly would be very cumbersome. So I just wanted to throw that out, that I had never heard of that.
What do you mean cumbersome? Because we go through all the questions
Because we'd have 9 people, and we'd say,
Right.
okay, 8 of you leave the room.
Oh, okay.
And,
What you had said earlier, moving the microphone. I mean, the interview, we'd go through all the questions with one applicant, then we move on to the second applicant.
unless they leave the room, you don't have to move the microphone anywhere, because it's just one microphone here, and all the other applicants are standing outside. And they go by question, one person's in the room, and then the next applicant comes in. So I probably talked about 2 separate things at one time and made it confusing.
I think how you interview the candidates,
how
we
you
need to
interview.
figure it out. Is
Yeah.
it one question at a time, or is it one candidate at a time?
Yeah, thank you. That was much better said. So I personally think that it would be, I'm fine with having all the applicants staying in the room, partly because we can't enforce it anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they should all be in the room. It creates transparency. We can't require them to do it. I don't
Yeah.
see the purpose of it.
I think,
In a process similar to like the League of Women Voters thing that we did, or whatever, where we're all sitting there and then whoever goes first rotates
Right,
along the line.
yeah.
I think
so you're
that's
good with that?
probably, yeah.
Okay, good. And then Dan, are you fine with?
Yes, instead of then not sticking with one person at a time for all questions, but sticking with one question at a time.
Yes, yes.
We have not, no. This is deciding whether, no, because we didn't decide, we're not alternating candidates for the first question.
We were talking about, and I
Right.
thought the way Tara put it, which was better than the way I put it, was one question at a time, meaning you ask one question and you go from candidate to candidate to candidate.
No, I disagree with that. Well, I'm not agreeing to that.
Okay, so how is it that you think we should do it?
I think you have the 8 candidates sit and they wait for candidate number 1 to be interviewed and go through all the questions. That interview's over, right? And particularly if you're going to do forced rankings, which is what we also discussed, we haven't decided, and then you go on to candidate number 2. I do not think we should be alternating questions with each candidate.
For a different view on that, I guess, given that they'll be responding to the same questions, if we start from one end and then start from the other end for the next question, it wouldn't be as though candidate 9 would be hearing all 8 candidates prior responding to each question that way.
Yeah, and that's what I thought we had talked about, that when we did it last time, you ask question A, and you start at one end, and everybody listens to everybody answer question A, and then you go to question B, very similar to League of Women Voters. Otherwise, whoever's number 9, they're going to hear all 8 questions answered by however many times, and I think it puts a false advantage on whoever happens to pull the short stick to go first or go last. Yeah.
This is the first time I've gone through this process, so I don't have like a real, I don't have some wealth of expertise or even perspective about this, but I will say that it's hard to imagine that the person going second will remember the answers of the 9 questions that preceded them. I think it would be nice if if people were not all in the room listening to the other questions, but if we can't demand that they leave, then, we're not running it in an interview like that. Yeah, I'm open to the perspective that you're offering here. This is not a process that I've gone through before.
Well, and this isn't a debate format, and this isn't something where people are then going to go vote for someone. We're making the decision there. We had discussed and again, we haven't decided on how we're going to review the candidates' responses, but we had discussed using forced rankings. You don't use forced rankings on a question-by-question, right?
I thought you could, because that's often how when I interview people, I will go question by question, and so that means each question is equal ranked, and I go through it that way. I mean, I've done it that way. So when you suggested at the end of the meeting forced ranking, that didn't automatically translate to me that we were going to ask them all the questions at one time.
I think we discussed when we were coming up with potentials for questions, we specifically made some edits to, or suggestions to put questions in there that spoke to individual people's experience and their ideas of issues in the district, specifically to get individual answers. So I had assumed we were talking about doing all the questions at once. I would strongly suggest that it allows a candidate to get going rather than segment and break it out. And I'm not particularly worried about someone repeating someone else's answer, because I think you can kind of figure that out, that, okay, they don't have anything, particularly because we had talked about a couple of questions that are individual, so you can allow people to give their insights. I think that would be, well, very segmented, obviously, to go candidate question one, all candidates question one, all candidates question two. I'd rather hear from a candidate for 15 or 20 minutes and then move on to the next candidate.
I'm not necessarily concerned about, who draw the short straw to be the last person speaking. I don't know that that's necessarily a disadvantage. It is what it is. I mean, I was listed fourth on a ballot, and it just that's sort of the way numbers. I think that's. But I think it would be a little tricky to imagine how you do a forced ranking if we're going to do in a roundtable format like that, versus having a person and having a decision and ranking them and then having.
Maybe I don't understand when you two are talking about forced ranking. It's something I thought we were referring to that we individually do on our sheet of paper.
It is.
And we do it, and I think I do it by question whenever I do any ranking. So I don't want to get hung up on that. I still think that we shouldn't do all the questions at once. I think I went through it, and I think there is an advantage, and there's some things about public education that I remember hearing other candidates say things, shoot, I wish I'd said that. I didn't think of that. And but it's also, I just don't see the problem with doing it. Just like you said earlier, League of Women Voters, that's how you did it. And when I was listening to all of you League of Women Voters, I liked hearing, I was able to contrast easier because there was one question on the table and each of you answered that one question. Whereas, like you said, Kevin, you doubt that the person that goes last is going to remember. Well, I would have a hard time remembering listening of what each person had said. And it's just a way to contrast each question among the applicants.
And I worry about some fatigue just from this end, depending on the number of applicants that there are. If it is 9, just when the 9th person is speaking, what our view is, and listening to that, which won't necessarily appear fresh at that time, whereas it would from the first person.
I've done, and these aren't teacher interviews, but I've sat through 6, 7 teacher interviews and done the whole interview at once, right? And then we bring a second candidate in, and then we do, right? And then we do forced rankings. I think it will be, I will find it very difficult to do forced rankings on every one of 6 to 8 questions, and then at the end, once we've interviewed all of the candidates, to sit and think, okay, am I going to wait one more? Am I adding these up and averaging them? And what am I doing in order to get my review of the candidate? And maybe that's my preference. I take all of the info and then I get a holistic, right? These are the strengths of this candidate. This is what this candidate could bring. I find that more difficult if we're going question by question and segmenting it out by question rather than getting a full picture of what the person will bring for the next 14 months.
I'd have a much easier time with that if the other candidates weren't in the room. For like when you talk about the teacher reviews, I assume that the others aren't in the room for one.
We're not copying answers.
Some of the questions are, will be, yes, some of the answers will be similar in that.
But they're going to be that way, I mean, they'd be that way anyway, so why?
Because you don't necessarily go in order of person A, B, C, D, when they go D, C, B, A.
No, and I know, but when you do job interviews, we ask a question, and then candidate 1 gives that, candidate 2 comes in, they may give the same answer. The candidate 2's not any less because they gave that answer. I mean, I don't understand why we can't.
The difference is they're in the room. In that situation, they're not in the room.
Well, there's no secret that people are going to be hearing. There's not one right answer that is going to be like, oh, that's the one that unlocks the magic box to be appointed.
I have a slightly different view.
Okay.
So I think we are divided on this. I think Dan and I want one approach and Kevin and Cynthia want another. So maybe we take a breather on this for a moment and talk about the application and then return to this item, because I don't think we have another board meeting before the...
No.
Okay, so we'll return to this item. So let's take a breather for a moment. And so the application, I think the one thing, the order's been changed according to feedback the board provided at the last meeting. That was one of the primary comments. The other comment was to be sure that we notified the applicant that this was part of public record, and this already was in the paragraph number 3, I think so. Let me see, where is it? Yeah, I understand the application materials I've submitted are subject to the laws governing public information. We did check with the attorney on the last paragraph, which is that you understand the district review my status, and it's referring to the Megan's Law database with the FBI and DOJ clearance. And at the last meeting, we were all surprised to see this because we weren't aware of this requirement, so we went back to the attorney, and this is not part of the ed code. So it's up to the board whether you would like to have, or I should say, we would like to have this clause in the application.
So it's not part of ed code to apply, but they do have to pass a fingerprint to serve on the board. They do have to submit fingerprints. So that was like one of the things that William Tunick was saying, was like, it's sort of letting them know.
See, that was, okay, so I must have read his email slightly
Yeah.
different.
That's what he was.
I thought he's, okay.
Yeah.
Well, so we need to all get our fingerprints. Yeah.
I am.
I mean,
Yeah,
I
right.
am, but it's not because.
Yeah, it was, I will obtain fingerprint clearance through the department. And my understanding from his email was that that's something that board members are supposed to do.
Because here it was clear, it said, if I'm appointed. It never, ever did imply that you had to do it when you apply. It says here, if I'm appointed.
Right, that's what I was saying. It was forewarning if they are appointed.
Right.
So you have to- right.
But we weren't notified of that requirement as a board. We weren't notified by the Office of Elections. It's not a requirement for running for school trustee.
Okay.
So that seems like that would be a district requirement, not a ed code requirement. Otherwise, it would be listed with the
I
position.
think she's checking the
Yeah.
email again, because I think I read it differently.
Yeah, so he says, it's not intended to impact selection, but to provide notice to the applicant, the district would take these steps after appointment.
But the district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so that was
I'm
it.
assuming he was going off of our board policy, which I didn't read that closely, but
So, yeah, so it's not law, but we can,
you're all saying it's also not practice.
Yeah.
right, so,
So we're not
right.
following our policy, we policy, we don't follow.
I will look that up. I didn't see anything. I feel like I read
I
this
don't
policy
remember
over and
this
over
the
again,
last time
too.
when I went through the process. I mean, I would have remembered this, but I think I would have remembered. So I suppose if it's not board policy, we can choose now not to include it. I got the sense that people didn't think it was necessary. We can then just look, and if it's in board policy, we'll include it. Does that sound like a good way to go?
Yes.
Okay, so does that make sense to you?
It does,
We're only going to include it if it's already in board policy.
but none of you are fingerprinted.
No. If it's,
Well, then we'll
if
go
it's-
get fingerprinted.
Well, because then we have to, right, we have to, I mean, if it's in board policy, then we either have to change the policy or we need to all get fingerprinted. So I
Right,
don't think we
right.
should ask something of the applicant that we haven't done ourselves.
But if it's in board policy.
I've
then
gotten, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
The four of us just get fingerprinted. Unless it's an issue.
Yeah.
Right, so.
So that sounds good to you, Dan and Kevin?
That we would get fingerprinted, we would,
If it's board
Specifically,
policy,
what
we
was
should get fingerprinted. I mean, I've been fingerprinted, but, I mean, we should. And so, but we're just talking now about
Well,
this
can't we look at
application.
Gamut right now? I mean,
I'm
what's it
looking
under?
right
She's
now.
trying to look, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll look while you guys continue to discuss. I'm, as a superintendent, I see why you would want your board members fingerprinted, because the last thing you want is like, oh, we've selected this person, we've sworn them in, and the next day we find out, lo and behold, you know,
That doesn't
no, I
that
know.
doesn't preclude them from serving.
It doesn't. I understand that, but we would be forewarned.
I mean, maybe it's in the policy, but you have privacy issues. If it's not required, it's a requirement for teaching, right? It's not a requirement to serve on the board because you aren't left alone with students. Students are
You
in the
don't
room,
supervise.
but that's a public meeting. So absent a restraining order, there are no restrictions on a public meeting. So it seems like we're blurring the issues of employment and trustee, but again, I don't know what the policy is.
Yeah, I don't see anything in policy. And we also got clarification last year that, you know, board members are not mandated reporters,
Right, that was the other thing.
you know, because they don't supervise children. So it would seem that in alignment with that, being fingerprinted would not be a requirement because you don't ever supervise children directly. So just take it off.
Sounds good.
Is there anything else on that application that we need to adjust?
I think once we approve the timeline, we were going to add another board meeting here on the back.
Okay.
So we'd put August 13th.
Do we get a printout of the draft questions,
Of the,
interview questions?
don't have
No,
them.
we, at the last board meeting, we discussed the fact we didn't want to talk about it any further and that we'd get a one-way communication. And if you weren't, I mean, we can bring those up again if you want. I didn't think thought we said we finalized those and didn't want to.
Well, right, but I think it would help, well, having them would have helped the discussion on whether to go with every candidate going through one question, right, and deal with some of the concerns.
I can,
But
you know what, I have them with me. We can Xerox them if you guys would like that, if that would help that part of the
many were-
discussion. Pardon me?
how many, we've worked our way down to 7 or 8?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And then by discussing them, does that mean we need to make copies for the back?
yes. You have
Yes,
to
we
make
do.
any
That was
documents
why
that
we
you're
didn't.
Okay.
Reviewing an open
Well, then we don't,
session
but, okay, that's fine.
available. Mary, I just emailed you the updated application without that last paragraph.
Okay, now I lost my agenda. So why don't we go back to the format? So Cynthia, you feel pretty strongly, it sounds like, that.
Well, I do,
to-
but if
to-
it's a matter of 2 and 2, I don't feel that strongly.
I've also, during employment and done it like what you're talking about, that you interview each candidate at a time and take notes and then consider it after. But just based on my personal experience, having been on the other side here, and some of the experiences I've had looking at, basically I keep going back to League of Women Voters, it was just I just found it very helpful, because so many of the questions are grounded in what we value in a trustee, and that's just my personal, I feel, it'll be easier for me, but I will, if the board really wants to go the other direction, I'm sure I can handle it.
Okay, may I ask a question then? So if we do it that way, where every candidate goes through question 1 and then question 2, what process are we going to have at the end to discuss our top candidates? Because if we do a forced ranking at the end of, and who knows, people can do whatever they want on each question. I wouldn't say do forced rankings going by individual question. That's not how I would do it, but maybe a forced ranking at the end. I mean, we haven't decided how we're going to rank the candidates or discuss them, but how will we do that?
Well, I think one thing we talked a little bit about was that when we spoke with the attorney who's done this with various school districts, one way to go was that each trustee would rank their top 3 candidates. And then there was a way then that you would just pass your top 3 ranking to an independent person in the district, and they would show what the top 3 rankings were. And then there'd be a discussion, and it'd be in front of everyone. I voted, this person is number 1, this is number 2, and this is number 3, and then we could see that it's already out there for everyone.
And I don't think there's a requirement that we each have to use the same process, and that one could go through it and have a point score for each question, or one might have the view that some questions are more important than others, and the 4 of us can have different views on that, and we can then choose whatever method we want in terms of getting to that ranking in the end.
And that way, and that was the part, Tara, I don't know if you recall, that there were various ways to go with, it would just show itself with having the top 3. Everyone might have the same top 3, or there might be one outlier, and then you either do something with that or not. I don't recommend we take an average or anything like that, but then that would be the form of discussion, saying, well, I see that we each chose candidate A in the top 3, but some of us ranked this person higher, and you just have a discussion about going back to what we value in a trustee, and what why somebody ranks somebody number 3 versus number 1. You just go through it that way, that like you normally would with an interview.
Okay. I just see that process being messier, and I'm a little hesitant. I don't want to rely too much on what the attorney says that they've done, right? Because that's a discussion that we had as a board about what we thought the process was going to be.
And if you remember, I really was just saying, you've had experience here, a lot more experience than I've had with the Kentville. I've had experience here. He's giving us just ideas of what he has observed throughout the state. We weren't relying on him to tell us what to do. So that's why I've just, provided information of what he's suggested we consider. I don't mean to imply that I'm relying on doing what he says to do.
Okay. I mean, I will agree with whatever process we decide to use. I think that's going to be a messier process if we get a lot of candidates than doing which is part of my reason, kind of backwards planning from that, on doing a complete interview, then a next complete interview, a next complete interview, and doing a holistic forced ranking, because you're comparing them as you go, which protects the person that comes last. And so I found that to be extraordinarily effective, but whatever the board decides. I just think that's going to be a messier process, doing the top 3.
So so like, for instance, at Kenfield, when you would do that, is it that you'd have candidate A, and then you have candidate B, and then you would talk and you would say which candidate out of A and B that you then think should move forward? Is it, you would do it after each, when you did or did you do it individually?
We did it individually, so it's not moving forward.
So it's
Yeah.
so then you just announced it at the end?
At the end.
So I suppose we could still do that rather than the top three. We just, at the end, announce which candidate each, I mean, that's another way to do it. We each say which candidate we rank as the highest candidate.
I like the idea of a forced ranking. I think that necessitates going through an entire interview. I think that will result in people hearing each other's answers. I think those first two things probably outweigh the somebody riffing off of someone else's answers. I mean, when we were talking about this originally, it hadn't really occurred to me that people were going to be sitting in the room listening to each other take their interview, which is like no interview. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people in my life and never interviewed people like that. But I guess considering that, forced ranking, and the fact that people are sitting in the room, I think it probably does make sense to go through. I think forced ranking is probably the right approach for ranking these people relative to each other. And I think if we're going to do that, we probably want to hear their entire set of answers before, versus a roundtable way.
Mm-hmm.
That's, but again, I mean, this is, I'm malleable on this just because this is, but as we sit and talk about it right now, that seems to make the most sense to me.
So for you, forced ranking, and to do forced,
interview.
and that's what I was going to say.
Yes.
And so for you to do a forced ranking effectively, you want to do the complete interview.
Yeah.
Okay. And that sounds like that's how you look at it too, Cynthia. So Dan.
I think much more flexible in terms of forced ranking versus top three, their way on that, because I think in some ways the top three is sort of forced with that. And I think if we were to, so the preference would be to stick with each question rather than with each candidate. If the preference were to go candidate by candidate, then I would suggest we ask the other candidates if they would sit elsewhere during it. Obviously, we can't enforce that, but would think that would be, if we're to do that process, we'd suggest it. Again, as Kevin just said, when you go candidate by candidate, typically it's not something with everyone else sitting there and listening.
What do you think about that, Cynthia? That if we go with the full interview, if we ask the candidate if they'd be willing to sit outside, knowing, and we'd be very clear, we say we can't force you to, but we're asking, would you mind sitting outside? Would you consider it?
I'm fine with that.
How about you, Kevin?
That's fine with me.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I think that's a really good compromise. I think that's a good way to go. And then maybe what we do, kind of what you were just saying about the top three is a forced ranking. I mean, we'll all know who number two is. So depending on how it goes, we'll just go from there.
And I would just suggest that I don't think we need to give it to any independent. Are you turning off my mic?
Darn, you caught me.
No. You have a little foot pedal down there. I don't know that we need to give if we do the top three after forced rankings, we don't need to give it to any independent person. We just go around and say, who do you have? Okay.
No. Nope. That was, I don't know what number idea that was. That was if there was some way of, some sort of algorithm they were going to use of averaging or something that somebody else would do. That was all. Okay, so I think we made a decision, but maybe we should repeat it, considering my memory skills last time. So we're going to do a forced ranking, and we are going to interview each candidate all questions at one time, and we're going to ask the other candidates to be seated outside, but we'll be clear with them that it's nothing that we can absolutely enforce. Okay, very good. Well, thank you, everybody. And we also agreed that we're going to,
Remove the mega
yes,
block.
thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. And we've agreed to the dates, and I believe this will be going as a press release.
Yeah, so Mary has
In
all the
5 minutes.
documents. Yeah.
Forgot we have you here.
It will all be posted on the website. We have, there's a link from the front page of the website to board vacancy application and FAQ, and that takes you to a page that will have the announcement letter, the application, the frequently asked questions, roles and responsibility of a school board, which we shared during the board workshop, as well as a copy of the Brown Act handbook. And Mary will also email the letter out, and in the letter, there is a link to the application that people will be able to click on. The application will also be available in hard copy from Mary and the superintendent's office from 8:30 to 4:30 between Monday through Friday during office hours between tomorrow and August 7th.
And did you, and I'm sorry, you were providing a lot of information, did you also include the governance handbook? The
Yeah.
latest, okay, good.
Oh, I didn't include our governance handbook. I included the Brown Act handbook. But I can dig that out too.
What do you all think about that? I think it's a good idea to include our governance handbook, the tables that we put together as a board. Good for them. I mean, that would help them understand, even though we would be updating it once they came on, because it'd be a new board, but just for them to, it gives them some good background.
I agree with that. Logistics-wise, Mary, is this going to be ready at 8:30 tomorrow morning, or should we say noon?
It's ready. It's ready now.
Just checking.
We have to add the date, though, on the application.
Yeah, she's got all that.
I did all that.
Yeah.
Wait, which date are you talking about?
board
April,
meeting, August 13th.
August.
Oh, no, we didn't do that. You want
Yeah.
us to add
No, we didn't. No,
Where?
This was what we were talking about, that
On the
once we approve.
on the application? You want this to say August
We
13th?
have to have the
No,
August,
above August
above, we have to have
13th. We've got
August
7 dates.
13th.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're being sworn in August 13th.
Right. It says that in the letter.
But they have to commit to that date.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one shortly. I might want to open my laptop and look at that letter again. Thank you for putting that letter together, by the way. I don't think we put one in here.
Which one?
The letter to the legislature. Yeah, I'll just open it up. Thank you. I'm just gonna. I'll let you finish that, Tara, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item for Senate Bill 328.
I can finish this letter. I'm just,
Can we just back up on the letter?
Absolutely.
Or should we say that if an application is not received, or if it's received after 4:30, it won't be accepted? What if a candidate does not come for an interview? It says candidates should plan to attend this meeting, but we don't say if a candidate doesn't come, they'll be disqualified. And I don't know what our position is on that. Because I think we're all...
I think they should come for an interview, and if they don't, they should be disqualified.
In the case
That's my
we only have
opinion.
one candidate and we choose not to do whatever it happens to be, but I think we have flexibility with that, right? I don't think we're,
Yeah, how would we evaluate their oral presentation if they weren't here? So that would be how we would solve that issue without,
Okay, we're all assuming something, but it's not spelled out in the letter, that they have to do the interview. It should say candidates must attend this meeting to be considered for the position.
So you're saying that candidates should plan to attend this meeting is not strong enough?
No.
How about if we said shall? I say there's a joke because all attorneys always like shall. I thought maybe, because that's a little more,
I think it should be candidates must attend this meeting in order to be considered for the position.
I might even just change, if we take the third line of this and sort of shift it to the first, so the governing board will hold a special meeting to review all applications and to interview the candidates on this date. It makes it very clear at the start. Right now, it's sort of buried in the third and fourth line in terms of that.
so you're suggesting put that in as the first sentence, kind of,
Right,
candidates
just to
should
make
plan,
it
you're
very
right.
clear for the
Yeah.
candidate.
What in the first sentence?
Just said here, governing board will hold a special meeting to review all applications and to interview the candidates, and then go through the date and place and such.
Okay, but I still think we need to say candidates must attend this meeting to be considered.
Yes, it's-
So just move the
Just-
date and time over.
Just change candidates must attend the meeting instead of should plan to.
Right, candidates must attend this meeting to be considered for the position. But Dan's suggesting that
The governing board will hold a special meeting on Monday, August 12th, 2019, 6 p.m. To review all applications and to interview the candidates. Candidates must attend this meeting to be considered for the position. Well, where do you want to put the location information's, if it doesn't come in that first sentence, it's,
Yeah.
however you like it. Doesn't-
So, I'm sorry, I was pulling up the other letter. Have we resolved, or?
Candidates
It's
must
just that second
attend.
sentence.
Must attend
Okay.
this meeting to be considered for the position.
So I'm just going to throw out the devil's advocate here. If somebody says, I can't attend that meeting, you're discriminating against me. Like, if you don't put this in there and you don't select somebody who doesn't show up, you just didn't select them.
we say you have to submit an application to be considered.
Right, but
So you
what
have
I'm
to
saying
interview
is
to be
like,
considered.
but if
But
they
if they
don't
have a
show up.
disability to
I'm just
get
saying,
here
if
and
they
not
don't
able
show
to?
up, you don't interview them, you select somebody. You've selected somebody based on all of the requirements.
All the data, and you're missing them.
For the interview.
Alternatively, that we're giving 4 weeks' notice for this essentially, and there are vacation plans for summer. So let's say that we don't get many applications, and so we get 3 applications. 2 people are available to show up. They're not exactly inspiring. The third person's away on vacation, known entity. Just, it's flexibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you put it that way, I don't see the problem, because we have a choice whether to select the candidate that doesn't show up for the interview or not, because they're already at a disadvantage because we only have their written response. We haven't had a chance to interview them.
but your public hasn't seen them interviewed either, and
But
you made some, I know, that makes me uncomfortable. That makes it seem like we've selected the candidate ahead of time from the written applications.
Then say they can dial into it, or if they can't attend.
Well, attending's by phone, it's fine. That's attending, that's within attending.
then we can make it clear that way in terms of the dial-in.
In person or by phone?
Right.
I don't think that needs to be spelled out.
No, yeah.
Attending means by phone. I mean, that's,
So you just want to leave it, candidates must attend this meeting to be considered for this position?
I do.
I'm stuck because I see both sides.
But okay, so I think a little bit, we talked a little bit about this in our special meeting, that this is not a job hire. This is someone who, as long as they meet the age requirements and the residency requirements, can apply for this position. And this is a transparent process, it's a public process, and the two items that we have said that that are important for us to be able to, I mean, look how much time we spent on the interview, right? Discussing the interview. The two things that we said that are important are the application, which has 8 or 9 questions, and the interview. I do not think that someone that does not make themselves available for an interview should be considered for this position. And if we suddenly then consider someone who didn't come to the interview and we select that person, but we didn't select someone who put the time in to come for the interview and be prepared for an interview, I think we open up ourselves to lack of transparency in the decision. And this is a public position, and there are minimal requirements for applying.
Would it improve, speaking of transparency, should we bring, since we gave notice that all the written applications are matter of public record, should we have their written applications available in the back of the room so that when we discuss the candidates at the end and talk about their written application as well as their oral interview? Just throwing that out there.
Well, that's standard. I mean, we'd attach it to the agenda, wouldn't we? Or no?
That's not what has been done in the past, apparently, here in this
Okay.
district. It's just that people are made aware that they can ask for it, and they do a public records request, or they just call for it.
Maybe we have 10 copies of each available.
You got that, Mary?
But back to the original issue.
So Kevin and Dan, do you have any thoughts?
I think we should obligate people to attend. I think if they can't attend in person, they should be able to attend. I mean, if they want to ask for consideration by phone, that's fine. And yeah, I think it's important to hear from these people, and I think I think if they cannot participate in a live interview, then they shouldn't be considered. You'd hope that they would take this process serious enough that they would find a way to show up. And regarding the timing, it may be short, but that's not within our control. The timing is what it is for reasons that are not a function of anything that we did. But I definitely want to hear people, either in person, hopefully, or by phone.
Have you changed your position, Dan, based on what you've heard, or do you still think that it gives us flexibility?
Well, part of it is just we don't know we don't know how many applicants we'll be getting and such, and so yes, it was want the transparency to it. I think with this, those who want to serve and have the interest, and if they're in the area, are going to be here for it. I don't think there's an issue with that. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to mandate that they attend that, but I'm winded on this, and so I'm flexible.
Okay, so do we have consensus on that?
Yep.
Yes, that they're required to come for the interview, in person or by phone.
Okay, got it.
Okay, is there anything else on this item before we move on to the assembly?
So we added August 13th, candidates are required, and we've removed the Megan's Law paragraph. Good?
I think that's good. Thank you, Tara. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to the next item, discuss letters of response to Senate Bill 328.
Yep. So this was something we discussed in the last board meeting where, and I think I shared some more updates we got from the flurry of activity in Sacramento. So these were letters that we drafted for both the I think the Ed Committee and as well as Senator McGuire to express our displeasure with his vote. Yep, so I think we just took some feedback around what we wanted to say and let him know. So those are the letters. I don't know if there's comments or suggestions.
My only suggestion, I think this is a really well-done letter, and thank you Cynthia and Tara for putting it together.
Tara put it together. I made a couple edits.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Tara. Is that although it points out that this, is really something that belongs at the local level, a decision by the, local district and school boards, what I don't want to lose is that these are public schools, and the public schools belong to the community. And so we want to take the community input, and that includes our cities and the people that don't have children in the school. We want to hear from the parents. This is not a minor change, and it has such a big ripple effect that this isn't, moving the clock back a half hour may seem like a minor detail, but it really has a greater impact, and it's all in the attempt to solve a problem that won't solve the problem. It's a complex issue, and it deserves a comprehensive evaluation, and we owe it to our constituents to hear from them. We've talked about the traffic, but and I'm sure other school board members, I've heard from parents that are pro and against it, and there's some real hardships to families, and for at the state level to come in and swoop in and mandate this is just not right. So that was the only part that I'm wondering if we want to add a sentence reminding them that the schools belong to the community, and the community needs need to be addressed.
Where would you put that? Because it's certainly dealt with in the bullet points. Did you want a
I think the bullet points are really good. I think sometimes, especially when people receive hundreds of letters, sometimes we just need to connect the dots a little bit more, and it was really that.
How about in the last sentence?
I think probably the last two sentences of the second paragraph.
Or I would say even at the very end of the letter, schools belong to the communities and their input is vital. For these reasons, we remain opposed to. Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's where it gets attention. It's right, we've gone through all the rationale, right? Which include what your concern, and we end it with schools or community resources, right? Or belong to, however we want to phrase it. And for these reasons, we remain opposed. Does that work?
That is a good place to put it, right at the end.
Okay, so you want to add a,
It's a concluding statement for these reasons we remain opposed to Senate Bill 328.
So you said public schools belong to the community?
For our public schools.
Our public school, to our community. and the communities,
For these reasons, because we've spelled out
Right.
all the community concerns.
yeah,
Or
I guess
potential
that's part
concerns.
of it, is that this is a partial list, and so I kind of like the way you added in, so the community input is vital, and the community,
Our schools belong to our communities, and their input is vital.
because when you think about what our role is as board members, we're responsive to the community, and
Okay.
so this is one of those areas that is really important.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to capture those thoughts. So, our schools belong to the communities they serve, and their input is vital. Their input,
I just sort of,
And-
our schools belong to our community, right? And this is from our perspective, so our schools,
belong.
Our schools
Yes,
belong to our
district.
community.
Yeah.
Their input is vital, period. Short, it's punchy, to the point.
Yeah, it has to be
takes into-
it has to be a take-home.
Yeah.
Belongs to the community,
our
community.
Our.
Our.
local.
Okay. So our public schools belong to our community. Their input is vital. For these reasons, we urge members of the Assembly Committee on Education to reject SB 328.
And I don't know if we're hung up on the there, which is an acceptable use for the singular, but,
Yeah.
so whatever you want to put in there for singular community.
We have moved towards inclusive language in our
Yes.
board
Right,
policies.
People still
Yeah.
resist it, even though it's been accepted as a single.
So any other comments on the letter? I believe this is an action item. We have it as a discussion item, but I think we need to take action in order for us to all sign the letter, correct? We're taking action that we are taking this stance, and we will be signing the letter. So can I ask for a motion? Oh, wait, this is one letter. They're
Yeah.
both very similar, but I would like the changes or the additions we've made for
So you
both
want them to
letters.
both letters, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right.
You're looking for a motion to approve the letters with those changes?
Yeah.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, that carried. And we approved the consent agenda. Gesundheit. So now we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
So I don't have a formal report, but I wanted to follow up on the respect and responsibility conversation from last month and report out that our admin team met in June, and we we took the opportunity to reflect on the year and what we think had gone well. We looked at data, particularly attendance data, California Healthy Kid data, as well as our achievement data, and looked at ways that, how can we move our work forward? How can we maintain our focus on equity? How can we, while addressing some of the things that have become very vitally important in our community around respect and responsibility, and, where we landed was strong relationships. And that making a concerted effort to improve the climate and cultures of our campus, because research shows that that improves learning, and particularly for our students who feel most marginalized, and taking specific action at each of our sites to make sure all students have a caring adult on campus. I had one of the members of my dissertation panel used to call it just give a damn theory. And she said, it sounds easy, but if everyone just gave a damn, but sometimes you actually have to learn what that looks like. What does it mean to a student to demonstrate caring? It often means that you're willing to give your time, that you're willing them to see them as a person outside of a student in your class, that they have other things going on in their lives, that you are willing to believe in them. Students can pick up high and low expectations from a teacher in about like 8.4 seconds, and all of those things really matter. So really focusing on what those action steps are that we're in, and how we're going to formulate our PD at each site around building these strong relationships, because I think foundational to strong relationships is respect and responsibility. That I feel I feel far more responsible to someone that I respect and that I have a strong relationship with, and that these are the ways that we're going to materialize on the ideas of respect and responsibility on our campuses. So it was a good day. We were device free for the day, which was
Oh my gosh.
Yay.
yeah.
And you're sleeping better, too.
Yeah, which was, it was nice. We took a little different approach. We had, they engaged in Socratic seminar and really dove into some topics around, what do we need to do? Good modeling, good learning. So it was a really good day, and that is how we're going to carry forward into next year. So we have another admin retreat on August 9th, and the morning of that retreat is a broader expanded leadership, and that's actually going to be a presentation from a sexual violence prevention organization, and that is actually focused on supporting victims in order to make reporting, again, themes of climate and culture on our campuses. How can we make sure that we have adults who are skilled in receiving this information so that students can get the proper support? How do we make reporting easier? How do we let kids know this? So it's hard to say I'm looking forward to that, but I am. It's it's a really important topic. You board members are all welcome to join that presentation. It's actually a workshop. It's not a presentation. It's an interactive workshop, and we're going to have some counselors there and wellness there, and so I'm excited about that. And then that afternoon, we'll revisit what does this relationship building around respect and responsibility look like moving forward, to have some more concrete plans in place.
Oh, very good. So do you guys do you have any update? I have one update, and Tara just reminded me, I just wanted to share that the reading list that Tara gave us, I am reading and listening because I downloaded it because I have trouble with reading sometimes, the white fragility, and it really, really is helpful. I'm really getting a lot out of it. Yeah.
And I'll second that. I've read all those books that Tara recommended, and the White Fragility also, and find them very useful. I had a question. In the June letter, I think there was a board section, or the board supports the parents we mean to be, and we should all be feminists, but you didn't support the other books.
I didn't write that.
Oh, okay. Is there a reason that we only supported 2 books, or?
Supported? What do you mean?
Well, there was a sentence I thought in there that said the board supports. The board supports.
Oh, that was a board
the parents.
update.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I should have put more.
Okay. I was just curious.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch that in the updates. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did start reading The Parents We Mean to Be also. So those 2 books, because I'm reading them both at the same time. I'm not very much fun with my peers anymore. I feel like, it's like I'm going through a second adolescence, and I'm really not fun. People are like, oh no. Yeah, like, oh, here she comes. And it does, it takes me back.
Yes.
Oh, it's horrible. No, it takes me back when I was a teenager, how, I'm always like, oh. Anyway, so Dan, how did the match go?
Oh, okay.
Good.
On a unrelated to anything academic, a recent Drake graduate qualified for the U.S. Amateur Championship next month in golf, which is a very big deal.
It is
and
big.
A guy named Max Morris, he's a great kid. He was a teammate of my son's when he played on the golf team at Drake, and It's remarkable. I think there's maybe about 100 people across the country, and people fly in from other countries to be able to qualify for this thing. So I'll keep you apprised. It'll be about this time next month that this kid's he's going to be out there in this tournament. It's exceptional. If he wins, he goes to the Masters and then goes to the U.S. Open. It's amazing. So.
Yeah.
He'll be Pinehurst 2 and 4. The champion. Well, look at that. You're up in your golf trivia. The championship would be on Pinehurst number 2, which is a world famous course. So anyway, it'd be nice to see one of our alum go off and win the U.S. Amateur. That'd be pretty cool.
I played golf before I had kids.
Okay, so Dan, I did want to give you a chance while you're drinking your water. Did you have anything you wanted to share with the board? Any kind of update? Okay. So before I mention, let's see, is there any public comment on any item not on the agenda? You three have anything? Okay. And one thing I meant to mention earlier on is that the board had not finished the closed session business, and so we're going to, rather than adjourn at this moment, we're going to recess and go back to closed session for a short while. And so Mary will let you know what time we come back to adjourn the meeting for the meeting summary. What's wrong, Trustee Cynthia Ronish?
No, nothing.
Okay, so thank you.